Welcome to Athletic Range. Today we're going to be talking about anterior range. What is it? So anterior range is going to be a comprehensive guide going over how to lengthen and strengthen the front side of the body so we can gain range of motion maximally in these tissues. So we're going to go through the ankle, knee, hip, spine, shoulder, and bicep, and then finish off with the wrists and the neck. Okay, so this is going to be a scalable guide, meaning we can adjust the difficulty and the range of motion we gain from each exercise. We're going to go over the ankle first. All right, so we're going to go over how to lengthen the ankle, which is tibialis anterior. It's this muscle in the front side of your ankle that goes all the way up and stops right before your knee. So first way we can do this is by sitting on our ankles. So if we just come here, we can actually just lay back on our ankles. If this is too much, what we can do is actually lean forward. Okay, so if I lean forward more and I hold on to something, I can actually reduce the amount of load I put on the ankle. I can also rock back and forth, right? I can kind of feel this position out, push my ankles into the ground. So I'm actually trying to almost lift my toes up like this. Obviously it's not going to happen, but I'm thinking about that as I'm in this position. Okay, now let's say this position doesn't cause any stretch. It doesn't for me. I've been doing this position for a while. We can add more range. So I have 2 yoga blocks. You can use anything, honestly, but this is the most comfortable. See how this creates more space between my ankle and the floor? This is harder progression. So I could technically just keep stacking yoga blocks higher and higher and higher, as much range of motion as I need. You can add more load. So you can add more range and you can add more load. So the second way we can add more load is actually by leaning back. Okay, so if we lean back farther, I'm actually going to get more load. So see how more of my body weight shifted back? Right? So if I actually extend the hip fully and then lean back fully, I'm actually going to get maximum load in those tissues. That one is probably the most advanced, right? You want to be mastering the basic version just on the floor, just coming up, coming down, coming up. All right. Now, the second option for this is to have a tibialis bar. It's probably the more convenient one, because you can adjust the amount of load exactly. You can get this on Amazon, but as you can see, this weight will pull me into an ankle stretch. I can add more weight. It allows me to get more range of motion in this shortened position, flex my ankle like this. So it's a little bit unique, but that's another option you can use. You can also strap a dumbbell to your foot. That also works. Let's go on to the knee. So for the knee, we're going to be doing what is called a couch stretch. So essentially what you're going to do, your knee up against the wall, and then rotate up, put my other leg in front, and then come up. Now I'm not flexing at the hip. I'm trying to keep tall posture with my shoulders to the wall. Okay, if I can do that, I have very good anterior range in the quads. Okay, specifically a muscle called rectus femoris. Now let's say you can't get into this position. What you could do to make this easier is to elevate the back leg. So if I take some yoga blocks and I elevate this roughly 6 inches, I can get into this position a lot easier now, because it reduces the amount of split between my legs and making it easier. Now, I would try to elevate this about 6 inches, or probably around 6 to 12 inches is pretty good, but trying to get your shoulders to the wall here, and then lowering this elevation. Now, if you wanted to make this harder, what you could do is elevate the front foot. So I'm gonna get back into this position. This position is much harder now. My legs are now split farther apart. I'm feeling more stretch sensation here, and that is much harder. Eventually, what we could do is progress this into what is called a reverse Nordic. So I'm going to show the progression for that. So reverse Nordic should only be practiced if I have a foundation of couch stretch. So what I'm going to do is basically just kneel on the floor and lean back all the way with my hips extended, okay? So if I come here, right, I can lean back and then come up, okay? Without flexing the hip, right? So that is much harder, requires very good body control in the rectus femoris. Now I could make it even harder. This is increasing the range, okay? This increases the range. So I go back. As you can see, I can go deeper now into position than I could before. That is much harder. I could even make this even harder by holding a weight. So I could use a weight on my chest and then lean back. Another way of working on this would be to use a cable machine. So if you use a cable machine, you can actually manipulate the amount of resistance that is being placed. So we can come here. Now if I have more weight on the machine, it's going to be easier. It's going to be assisting me more. I can use this to help me get deeper into position if I'm not strong enough yet. All right, so now we're going to go over the next progression, which is for the hip. So we've already covered the ankles, the shins, right? The knees, right? So the knee to the hip. Now we're going to cover the hip to the spine, the lower spine. Okay, so this is the hip flexor. So this would be the split squat progression. Actually, to make this as easy as possible, you would want to elevate the front foot. Okay. From here, I'm trying to keep my back leg straight and try to lunge forwards. So as I go forwards, I'm going to feel a hip flexor stretch in this back leg. Okay. Now I'm trying to keep a tall posture. Right, I can even put my hands up on my head to intensify the stretch, or put them down to lessen it. But I'm just going to do reps here and try to keep that front foot flat so I can sink deeper into the stretch. And that is the first progression. Now you can elevate this higher, between 6 to 12 inches. Eventually you would want to be able to do it flat on the floor, which is actually going to increase the mobility demands on the hip back leg hip flexor, okay? Let's say I wanted to make this even harder. What I could do is actually elevate the back leg. If I elevate the back leg, I'm going to get an even greater hip flexor lengthening effect through this leg right here. It's quite intense. And if you're looking to improve like your front splits, this is the progression you want to work towards. Sometimes it's pretty useful, especially when you're going pretty high elevation on the back leg, to use a little bit of weight, right? Or for any variation, you can use a little bit of weights to kind of get you a little bit deeper. So I'm just going to get into this position, load that hip flexor nice and good, right? And I'm trying to tuck my pelvis. So I'm not trying to let my rib cage flare like this. I'm trying to keep everything nice and tight, right? Then come up. Right, I could even pulse in this bottom position so I can kind of come up, come down, and then just finish the rep. So now we're gonna go over the spine. All right, so this is cross bench pullover. So cross bench pullover is for the thoracic spine. We're really gonna be stretching out the intercostals, really the rib cage, even part of the chest. So really what you're gonna do is set up sideways to a bench, okay? And from here, I'm going to put my shoulder blades just so they're off or on the bench, but my shoulders off the bench, okay? I'm gonna grab this weight and I'm going to hold this with the triangular grip. I'm going to reach back behind me as I drop my hips and then come up, okay? So here, I'm dropping my hips, intensify that stretch, come up. You're really gonna feel this in your abdominals, right, in your lats, which is technically not an anterior muscle, but you're gonna feel it in the front side of your body. Then come up. So I'm trying to keep tight, and then come up. This one, pretty self-explanatory. Now, for this one, obviously, you would use more weight if you want to progress the exercise. We can also increase the range by having a foam roller and a way to attach that foam roller to the bench we can take this foam roller and we can make sure it's pretty secure to the bench. You don't want it to slide off, right? I'm gonna keep that same concept though. Drop my hips, they come up. As you can see, this puts more range of motion on the thoracic spine. Because of this raised surface here, and that is cross bench pullover. So adding more weight, adding more range of motion would be the solution to progress this exercise.
Another version you can do is up against the wall or some sort of surface, and you're going to put your arms on the wall like so and try to reach down with your chest, opening up your thoracic spine. Now you can just hang out here, or you can do reps like I'm doing right here. Come up and come down.
All right, so now I'm gonna go over the next progression, which is for the chest and the biceps and the shoulder. Okay, so the pullover really stretches out the front part of the body, the intercostals, but really it doesn't get into the anterior deltoid or the biceps very well. It gets to some of the chest, but really to get a maximize a chest stretch, we need to, or the chest, shoulders, and biceps, we need to do what is called a Smith curl. So what I'm going to do is basically a progression of the lying bicep curl. I'm going to lay on a bench and I'm going to lay back and allow my arms to come out fully. Okay, so I'm kind of like in a T pose right now, and I'm trying to curl this way. Okay? I'm gonna go down and then curl this way. I'm feeling a very intense stretch in the bicep and the chest and the shoulder. Okay? Now, let's say I wanted to make this harder. Okay? If I wanted to make this harder, I would actually elevate this incline and get my shoulders off the bench. So I'm gonna adjust this incline 15 degrees, okay? And grab those dumbbells again. If I wanted to use more weights, I could. I'm using 15 pounds, so, and that gives me a pretty good stretch. So I'm gonna get off the bench right here, and have my shoulders just off the bench, my shoulder blades just off the bench, and I'm going to allow those weights to pull me down. Okay? Now I'm feeling a very intense stretch. So this is improving my thoracic mobility and my range of motion in my anterior deltoids and the biceps and chest. Right, so I'm trying to keep externally rotated in the shoulder, and there we go. So that is Smith curl. So obviously adding more weight, we can increase the incline higher to get even more stretch. All right, so right now we're going to cover the last two pieces of this, which are going to be the wrists and the neck. Okay, so for the wrists, very simple. All we're going to do is actually just do a very simple wrist curl. So we're going to come here, let the weight pull me down, and then curl up. Okay, so I'm trying to keep my forearms on the bench, right? And I can kind of think about pushing my forearms up towards the ceiling as the weight pulls me down. Okay, and that's going to kind of maximize the stretch. All right, kind of letting them go on the fingertips. Come up. All right, fingertips. Come up. Now we could do a body weight version of this, which would be actually placing your wrists, your hands onto a surface, and then curling up. Okay, curling up. If I wanted to increase the stretch, I'd move my wrists backwards, okay, towards my body, and just curl up. Okay. This is kind of a similar sensation, and that's kind of the option you would use if you had no weights. Now let's go over to the neck, which is the final piece of the anterior chain. The neck flexors are really responsible for curling your neck down. I'd recommend having a towel for this one and a small weight. You can use, I just recommend starting off with around 10 pounds. I'm gonna get on this bench. I'm going to put this weight on my head, and allow this weight to pull me down into a neck stretch. Now, I'm trying to keep my jaw closed and my tongue on the roof of my mouth. That tongue is on the roof of your mouth so that you can actually maximize the neck stretch. For this one, pretty self-explanatory. You want to have around a 15 to 30 degree incline for this one, and then use a towel and a weight to make sure the weight's not actually pressing on your head. You could also just use your hands, right? So I could just use my hands as the resistance if you don't have weights, but obviously going heavier would be the progression for this one. We could also add something like the fingers. So if you wanted to do just, a simple finger push-up, my fingers on the surface, pressing down and then coming up, right? So I can kind of do like a push-up almost with my fingers. As you can see, I'm stretching at this bottom position and then pressing up. So that would be like the final piece. But that is anterior range. We've covered the ankles, knees, hips, spine, shoulders, chest, biceps, right? The wrists, and also the fingers and the neck. So those are the progressions. If you have any questions, just type in the comments. Hope to see you next time.